On March 8, 2014, at exactly 12:42 a.m., a massive Boeing 777 took off from the runway of Kuala Lumpur International Airport into the night sky. This was Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 bound for Beijing. On board this flight were 227 passengers, 10 cabin crew members, and 2 pilots. Commanding the plane was 53-year-old Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, one of the most senior and experienced pilots at Malaysian Airlines. Alongside him was 27-year-old First Officer Fariq Hamid, for whom this was a training flight. After this flight, he was set to become a fully certified pilot. For the next 20 minutes, everything was completely normal. The plane was flying smoothly along its designated route. At 1:08 a.m., the flight left the coastline of Malaysia behind and began heading over the South China Sea toward Vietnam. Captain Zahari reported over the radio that the plane was at an altitude of 35,000 feet and that everything was going fine. About 11 minutes later, the plane was about to enter Vietnam's air traffic jurisdiction. Therefore, Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control radioed the plane one last time and said, "Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night." From the other side, Captain Zahari's voice came through. "Good night, MAS 370. There was no panic in his voice. Everything sounded completely normal, but no one knew that these words spoken by Captain Zahari would be the last transmission ever heard from this plane. After this, no contact could ever be established with MH370 again. This flight suddenly vanished into thin air and became the biggest, most terrifying mystery in aviation history. Just 30 seconds after entering Vietnamese airspace, at 1:21 a.m., the plane suddenly went completely blank on the radar. Kuala Lumpur ATC did not pay much attention to it initially, assuming the plane had moved out of their radar range and entered Vietnamese territory, which was a normal process. But on the other side, something else entirely was happening on the screens of Vietnam ATC. They saw that MH370 did enter their airspace, but suddenly its blip disappeared from their radar as well. The Vietnamese controllers continuously tried to establish contact with MH370, calling out over the radio, but there was only silence from the other side. After nearly 18 minutes of continuous attempts, Vietnam informed Kuala Lumpur that their plane had gone missing. Normally, in such an emergency situation, the Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center is alerted within an hour. But here, it took a full 4 hours to activate the emergency response. It was already 6:32 a.m. This was the time when the plane was scheduled to land in Beijing, but the runway was empty. The plane did not arrive there. A massive search operation was launched immediately. According to the map, the plane was over the South China Sea between Malaysia and Vietnam, so the first search operation began right there. 34 ships and 28 aircraft from 7 different countries combed every inch of the ocean, but not even a tiny piece of the plane was found. About 4 days later, on March 12th, news broke that shocked everyone. It was revealed that even though the plane had disappeared from civilian radar, a military radar had quietly tracked it that night. And the most shocking part was that, according to the military radar, the plane was last seen at 2:22 a.m. But it wasn't over the South China Sea. It was near the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The plane was flying west from Malaysia over the Strait of Malacca. The military radar readings indicated that the plane had turned completely away from its original direction and was flying north toward the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. This revelation shook the entire world. Why did the plane suddenly start flying in another direction? Did it crash into the Himalayas while heading toward India? Or did it go to Kazakhstan? A few more days passed, and new evidence emerged from satellite data. It was discovered that even after disappearing from radar, the plane was automatically trying to establish communication with a satellite. Large planes like the Boeing 777 frequently send automatic pings to satellites, much like your mobile phone attempts to connect to a known Wi-Fi network. But the problem was that this data did not contain the exact GPS location of the plane. The satellite only knew that the plane was attempting to connect. Investigators took advantage of this. They calculated the angle of the satellite's antenna and the timing of the received signals. They found out that the plane had attempted to contact the satellite a total of 7 times. These were called satellite handshakes. Each handshake created an imaginary circle on the map. The 7th and final circle represented the time when the plane was still in the air. However, this final circle was massive. It covered a vast ocean area stretching from Kazakhstan all the way to China, Indonesia, and Australia. After calculating the plane's speed, and the remaining fuel, scientists marked a section of this circle, which the world knows today as the 7th arc. This location was roughly 1,200 miles, 2,000 kilometers, west of Australia, a deep and unexplored ocean where human reach was practically non-existent. Leaving all other directions aside, the entire focus was now on the 7th arc. By April 2014, surface search efforts on the ocean were stopped because it was clear that if the plane had crashed, it must have sunk deep into the ocean. This marked the beginning of the largest and most expensive underwater search operation in human history. Weeks, months, and years were spent scanning the ocean floor, but nothing was achieved. 3 years later, after spending nearly $160 million, the operation was finally called off. It was deemed a failure. But then, in July 2015, a ray of hope appeared. The first piece of the plane washed ashore on Reunion Island, located east of Madagascar. It was a broken flaperon from the plane. This proved that the plane had indeed crashed into the ocean. Following this, in 2018, an American company named Ocean Infinity started a new search operation under a no-find, no-fee contract. Their advanced underwater vehicles mapped the ocean floor, where they discovered massive underwater mountains and volcanoes. But after months of hard work, they failed as well. When the plane could not be physically found, investigators began digging into the background history of the passengers and pilots. Had someone hijacked the plane? Following this background check, 3 main theories emerged. The first and highly controversial theory pointed suspicion toward Captain Zahari Shah. It was suggested that he deliberately turned off the transponder and crashed the plane into the ocean. 3 strong pieces of evidence were cited to support this. First, the plane had taken a sharp 180-degree turn manually, not automatically. Second, the plane was flown right along the border of Thailand and Malaysia, so that the radars of both countries could not track it. This appeared to be a calculated move. The third point was very interesting. Captain Zahari had a flight simulator at his home, on which he had practiced a flight path that closely resembled the actual route taken by MH370. However, official investigators rejected this theory. Zahari was a highly respected, stable, and cheerful person. He had no family or financial issues, and not a single sign of being suicidal was found in his behavior. The second theory involved hijackers. It was discovered that 2 Iranian men were traveling on the plane using fake passports, one Italian and one Austrian passport, which had been stolen in Thailand. It was suggested that this could be a terror attack, but a deep investigation by Interpol revealed that they were merely asylum seekers trying to settle in Europe using stolen passports, not terrorists. They had nothing to do with the crash. The third theory is considered the most logical and the most terrifying, known as hypoxia. Experts believe that as soon as the plane entered Vietnamese airspace, a catastrophic technical fault occurred. Perhaps a fire broke out in the cockpit, or the cabin pressure dropped suddenly. Because of this, a severe shortage of oxygen occurred inside the plane. Zahari attempted to turn the plane back toward Malaysia in an emergency, but before he could do anything further, everyone among the 239 people on board lost consciousness due to the lack of oxygen. The entire plane became a flying coffin, also referred to as a ghost flight. The autopilot kept running on its own. The plane continued to fly through the dark sky for hours, and when its fuel was completely exhausted, it plunged straight into the depths of the Indian Ocean. Several other bizarre theories also emerged, such as an alien attack, a U.S. military cover-up, or a new Bermuda Triangle, but those were all rumors. For years, darkness prevailed, but now a major ray of hope has emerged. A retired aerospace engineer named Richard Godfrey claims to have solved the mystery. He used an amateur radio wave technology called WSPR-net. Whenever a radio wave travels and a large plane passes through it, the signal gets disturbed. By tracking these weak signals, he has designed an exact new flight path for MH370. According to Godfrey's computer models, MH370 is located exactly at that point on the 7th arc today, under an ocean about 2.5 miles, 4 kilometers deep. His claim is so strong that he has specified a very small radius of just 40 nautical miles and stated that previous search operations had missed this specific point. Drift analysis, meaning the direction of ocean currents, also supports his calculations. This is because the 27 pieces of the plane found to date had drifted from there to wash up on Madagascar and surrounding islands. If a deep search is conducted again in this specific 40 nautical mile zone, perhaps this most terrifying mystery in aviation history will finally be solved.